our top news story of the day, before we continue with anything else, is going to be the 2 unavailable videos are hidden. Democrats are signaling a deal that is fast approaching on the infrastructure, okay?
Washington now, after months of negotiations, Democrats could be just days away from reaching a deal on President Biden's economic plan. Our chief White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, is at the White House with the latest on all of that. Good morning, Cecilia.
Hey, Amy, good morning to you. Speaker Nancy Pelosi says they seem to be about 90% of the way there to reaching a deal. I got to tell you, they all seem to be closer to a deal on this than they've been so far in these negotiations. One source is telling us there could be a House vote on this bipartisan infrastructure plan. That's traditional infrastructure like roads and bridges you're seeing there as soon as Wednesday. So yesterday, the president hosted these 2 key senators to Delaware, his home there. Chuck Schumer, you see him, Joe Manchin. Manchin, of course, is one of these key moderate holdouts. The White House called the discussion productive. This would be a really big win for President Biden if they can pull this off. But there have been some major concessions in order to get moderates and progressives on board. Right there, you see them. The overall price tag slashed to $3.5 trillion, from $3.5 trillion to just under $2 trillion. Proposals like tuition-free community college scrapped. The amount of paid family leave.
Why? The question I have here is why? Like, for example, paid family leave going from 12 weeks to 4 weeks. The question I have is, like, why would you do that? What is the reason for it? It's not government spending or anything like that. So what could be the fucking reason why paid family leave is dropped from 12 weeks to 4 weeks? Like, what is the reason? The reason is that this is a corporate oligopoly. A corporate oligarchy, sorry, and that these negotiations do not revolve around what's best for the American public, but instead revolve around what's best for the American corporations, most of which aren't even like fully American corporations and just simply claim to be American corporations, yet park all of their assets in countries that are considered legal tax havens like Ireland, or even offshore tax havens. So a completely ridiculous piece of the negotiation. And the only reason why I am hyper focusing on that, other than like the lower price tag, for example, is because it is precisely the best representation of this deal, of this quote unquote deal being spoiled and sullied, not for legitimate reasons, but instead for absolutely frivolous corporate bullshit. Okay. Ireland isn't a tax haven anymore, bruv. Your states are. That's true. Ireland was historically a tax haven, but now it's no longer going to be one because there are what do you call it here? By the way, a lot of notifications didn't go out today because I started earlier than I usually do. So retweet this if you want people to know. Anyway, how does it go from 6 trillion to 2 trillion? And progressives can't do anything about it with 90 plus representatives. Yeah, no picture today. I'm sorry. I don't have any way of like literally fucking downloading a photo, and then I didn't want to go through the process. Apple owed 13 billion euro in tax to Ireland, and Ireland said, keep it. We don't want it. Okay, something I find insane about the U.S. economy is that big business hires illegal immigrants to keep wages low, and then big business donate to conservatives that hate rhetoric against illegal immigrants to win elections. Well, the reason for why you do that is the anti-immigrant rhetoric serves the corporations that continue to hire undocumented immigrants at low wages. They don't want documented immigrants to be, or they don't want undocumented immigrants to become documented part of the documented labor force, and that's precisely why we have immigration law that makes it impossible. Okay? That's literally the point. Historically speaking, that is exactly how immigration law has worked side by side with corporate interests in this country.
Reduced. The White House had really ramped up the pressure, Amy, in recent days to get a deal done in this. They want something to show before the president leaves for this big European trip on Thursday. He's got this big climate summit in Glasgow, Scotland. He wants to be able to point, Amy, to a big win back home there.
And Cecilia, Democrats now signaling a new way to pay for all of this?
Yeah, they are. And you know this because Arizona Senator Kirsten Sinema, she's been opposed to President Biden's plan to tax big corporations, raise taxes on big corporations. So Democrats are now looking at other avenues, including what they're calling this wealth tax. This would be taxing the nation's billionaires. Amy, they also say they want to tax overseas earnings and increase IRS enforcement.
Cecilia Vega at the White House. Thank you, Cecilia.
They're positioning against, which Kirsten Sinema literally is like against raising the corporate tax. Like, they're positioning against raising the corporate tax to like pre-Trump levels, despite the fact that Kirsten Sinema personally voted against the Trump tax cuts when, you know, Democrats were not in power, is of course yet another perfect example of hypocrisy, obviously, and it completely shows what her values are. And it's also proof that I'm fucking right, okay? I am right when I say Democrats don't care about this shit. Democrats literally, when they're in a position of power, want to fuck it up because their real interests lie with the corporate benefactors rather than the American people, okay? That is the reality. There is no better representation of that than like Kirsten Sinema doing the work for the rest of the Democratic Party, doing God's work there by playing the spoiler role, her and Joe Manchin. Because a lot of these Democrats literally do not want this. Like, there are plenty of Democrats who straight up are like, yeah, well, my constituents would be hurt by this. Okay, my constituents, like my real constituents, I mean. My actual constituents I give a fuck about. The wealthy corporations, those people, right? So that is that's basically what's going on here. It's basically Kirsten Sinema's role that she is here. Low-key conspiracy theory, to be honest. Really? That's a conspiracy theory to you? That, like, you think that, like, Joe Lieberman is a standalone individual and has always been? You think that, like, suspiciously there's always... It doesn't matter if we have 60 fucking Democratic senators. It doesn't matter if we have 50 Democratic senators. But somehow always Democrats, when they're not in a position of power, have like these bold legislative ideas that they advocate for, whether it be Medicare for fucking all or whether it be, pushing back against Trump's tax cuts. But when they are in a position of power, they literally reverse that. That's a conspiracy to you. It's a conspiracy in the sense that they are conspiring, but it's not a conspiracy theory. It just means you're a fucking dumbass if you can't see exactly what I'm saying to you. And it's not just me. Like, if you watch like a Ezra Klein or a neoliberal like that, they'll describe this to you. They'll say the exact same shit. They'll just basically say, Democrats always have a loud and progressive and bold agenda when they're not in a position of power, but significantly dial it back surprisingly. The difference between me and someone like, an Ezra Klein or a Matty Iglesias is that I don't say, that's really surprising. Why are they doing this? I simply cannot comprehend why they would cuck their own agenda like this. I'm basically just saying that they are cucking their own agenda on purpose. That is the job. Their job is to cuck their own agenda because their own agenda is not with the American public. Their real agenda is getting reelected and maintaining the same grip of power that corporations of the wealthy have had in this country, but just from the Democratic side. That's precisely what the fuck this is. Wasn't Lieberman the one who vetoed the public option for Obamacare? Yeah, Lieberman was the standalone person. There's always like one or two guys in the Democratic Party. It doesn't matter how many fucking votes we have, okay, within the Democratic Party. There's always like some guy that suspiciously is able to tank it individually. You know what I mean? It's always like one vote short. Oops.
Well, hey there.
How will this help them get reelected, though? They are sabotaging the programs on purpose by not funding them. They don't care. It doesn't matter. It literally does not matter. Like, individually, some of the Democrats who are fearful about their position, that are not like protected, they care. Okay. But that's it. Their reelection chances do not revolve around like actively doing legislation that helps their constituencies. I mean, think about it. Republicans do this too, by the way. That's not all that different. What, like Donald Trump ran on a boatload of different items, okay? some of which were absolutely ridiculous. For example, jailing Hillary Clinton. If I'm president, I will jail Hillary Clinton. That's what Donald Trump said. Is Hillary Clinton in jail? No, she's not in fucking jail. Why is she not in jail? Because he was never going to do that. Also, how the fuck would he do that? That's a different story, right? Like, I'm going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. That didn't fucking happen, right? What did happen, however, the signature legislative accomplishment of the Trump administration was tax cuts for the corporations and tax cuts for the wealthy. Tax cuts that the middle class got, the minimal tax cuts the middle class got that made them feel like they actually had accomplished something, that Republicans were actually doing something good here, and this like overnight legislation that was like this fucking thick that not a single goddamn person was physically capable of reading, that had provisions in it where the tax cuts for under $250,000 a year, for individuals making under $250,000 a year, would increase by the time Trump was out of office. That's happening already. So if you're in the middle class, if you make less than $250,000 a year, you're already no longer seeing those tax cuts. Those tax cuts are going to slowly go back up for you, okay, and go back to the previous levels. Whereas the tax cuts that were permanent was the corporate tax rate, lowering the corporate tax rate. The tax cuts that were permanent were the top marginal tax cuts. Does that not strike you as surprising? Do you not recognize that, like, that's kind of weird that, you are never getting those tax cuts? Like, you're never actually going to see permanent tax cuts in the middle class, and that only the top 1% of wealth are actually getting permanent tax cuts? Isn't that weird? Yeah, it sunsets in 2024. Sorry. It slowly trickles upward back to prior levels. Okay? And I mentioned this a million fucking times. Yeah, middle class tax cuts were set to expire. Of course. Yes.